This video accompanies my blog post on grafting with special attention on grafting and pattern. And since I've been knitting and teaching, I have come across many different ways that describe how to graft. And recently I came across a method that, or a way of describing it, that made immediate sense, and what made it even more interesting is that I could actually remember it. And it is in the blog and videos of a knitter called Queenie Knits, and I will be putting this link in my blog so you can check it out for yourself. Now, the problem I have with Kirschner's is a couple of things, and one is I always forget how to do it, and it does not remember the mnemonics or whatever. I do forget to do it, how to do it, so I always have to look it up just to check myself. I don't do it often enough that I remember. And the second thing is blocking in pattern, or grafting in pattern, because there is, if doing it in regular stockinette is confusing, doing it in a cable or some other sort of pattern where you have alternating knits and purls, I can really never remember. And I have looked at a bazillion different ways to do this, and I've tried quite a few, and they all have the same results. Now, first I'm going to show you the method that Queenie Knits recommends for remembering this, and then I will talk about grafting in pattern. You can see that I have a couple of stockinette stitches here, and then some ribbing. Now, the first step in any grafting pattern is going to be to deal with the selvage stitch. And because this is any grafting technique is going to have you pass through the stitch twice, we're going to start with the second half of what you do, and that is to purl the needle on the front and to knit the needle on the back, and then you're done. Okay. Go in as if to purl and as if to knit. Now, when you graft, I'm not going to go into how you set up a graft. If you're looking at this, you should already have had some experience with this. If not, look at my other videos where I discuss it in more particular. But like any grafting instruction you see, you've got your front needle and your back needle, and what you want them to do is to look the same when they're positioned like this, and then that requires you having them lined up with the wrong side on the back needle and the right side facing out. Now, with a method that Queenie Knits recommended is that she suggested always looking at a pair of stitches, this stitch and this stitch. Those are the two that we're going to be grafting. And if the stitches are the same, that is, they're both knits, then you knit the first one because that's a knit stitch, or rather put your needle in as if to knit, and then you take it off if you've ever grafted before, and then because the stitches are the same, you pass it through in a different way. And the same thing on the back. I've got a purl stitch and a purl stitch. The stitches are the same, so because this is a purl stitch, I'm going to go in purlwise, and I'm going to then, because the stitch is the same, go out the opposite way. A knit stitch next to a knit stitch, knit, purl, knit, knit off, purl on, and in this on the back needle, purl off, knit on. And that's what you do for stockinette and reverse stockinette. Knit on because they're knit stitches, and purl because that's a purl stitch, and it's the same, so I'm going to go the opposite direction. Now, what Queenie Knits recommends doing when you've got stitches that are different is that this stitch will determine the way the needle goes through both of the stitches. Because the stitches are different, the needle passes through the same way. So knitwise drop, knitwise stay on, because it was a knit first. Here I've got a purl and a knit, and because the purl is first, I go purl and then knit. Knit and a purl, Same thing. I go in, oh, actually, I'm sorry, that's a purl and a purl next. So I treat it, I've got 2 stitches the same. I go in purlwise and knit out because those stitches are the same as you would find in ribbing. And I've got a knit stitch here, so I'm going to knit and then purl because it's a knit stitch next to it, and that is going to have a purl and a knit. So I would go in purlwise and purlwise. Now, I have looked at and knit and knit. I've looked at a lot of different ways to do this, and every method I've seen has been a variant, and all of them have the same problem, and that is when you graft. Even if it is stockinette, you are always going to be a half stitch off. There is going to be an offset. And you don't notice it in stockinette because stockinette upside down is the same. But in rib, you do. Now, this is a swatch where I've used that technique. And if you look at it, it looks like, well, the ribs continued. Hooray, hooray. I'm happy with it. But if you are to stretch it, notice that there is an offset. In grafting, unless somebody tells me otherwise, there's not a way to avoid this. And your options are Tech Knitting in her articles have a couple of suggestions. I'm not going to go into them now. I would just say if you can't live with this, well, maybe you should get used to it. You can seam it, that's going to look slightly different, but there's always going to be an offset whenever you do this. It's like if you are binding off at an armhole. On the right side, you're going to be binding off as you begin the row. When you get to the other, on the right side. On the other side, you're going to be binding off on the wrong side. That side is always going to be a row longer. Is there a way to avoid this? Not really. It's just the way it is. And that is how this grafting goes as well. In most projects, you're not going to notice that at all. And so how big of a deal is it? Well, it just depends on the type of person you are. I frankly can live with this. So that is how you can graft off in pattern. My blog is going to have a lot more information in it, and also a link to the blog and the video I was talking about.